Okay, well, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us today on the Integrity Systems Company Stand By What You Sell webinar, especially for Western Australia. I'm Deanna Lush from Ag Communicators, and I'll be helping out with facilitation on today's session. Today is all about helping you understand the elements of Australia's red meat integrity system and providing you with practical tips so you can stand by what you sell. The webinar is hosted by Integrity Systems Company with support nationally from the peak industry councils. So that's Sheep Producers Australia, Cattle Council of Australia, and the Goat Industry Council of Australia. In WA today, we are supported by the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development as well. So a few housekeeping items before we proceed. So we're running today's session as a webinar, so this does mean that your microphones are muted. But we want to be very interactive, and so welcome any questions you might have as we go through. We have the Q&A function enabled, so if Zoom isn't your platform or you haven't used it for a while, just move your cursor to the bottom of the screen and you'll see the Q&A button. So just click on that one and type your questions in there. We will answer the questions at the end of each section in the presentation, and then we'll have a general Q&A right at the end of the webinar. Now, if we have a significant tech issue where you can't see or hear us anymore, we'll just close the meeting down and we'll send you a new invitation within 10 minutes and we'll just pick up from where we left off. But fingers crossed we're all good for today. Now, introducing who we have on today's session. So our presenter is Kathleen Allen. Kathleen is Communications and Evaluation Manager for ISC. She is responsible for the rollout of all the comms, stakeholder engagement and evaluation activities right across the organisation. And she's also a livestock producer. She's based in Yass. So in addition to her ISC role, she is definitely speaking from practical experience when it comes to putting the integrity system into practice at her place. Also from ISC, we have Emily Duncanson, who is the ENVD Product Manager. We've got George Basher on the line as well, who is Operations Analyst. And we also have Communications Officer Joe Gangemi and Project Officer Claire Austin. And also from DPIRD, we have Beth Green, who many of you may know. She is Manager of Livestock Identification and Traceability, and she'll answer any of your queries where there's a state-based responsibility for that part of the integrity system. Now, the session is being recorded today and we will circulate the link in an email to you in the next 24 hours, along with some resources to help guide you in your use of the integrity system programs. We also have a short evaluation link at the end of the presentation so we can get your feedback and understand if this way of receiving updates is most useful to you. So on that note, I will hand over to Kathleen to start the presentation. Oh, hang on, Kathleen. I think you're still on mute. Well, Kathleen, can you hear us? Are you able to just pop yourself off mute? There we go. Perfect.
Yep. Sorry, unmuted and my mouse decided to have a little moment. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much, Deanna. Thanks to everyone for joining us this afternoon, and thanks in particular to Beth from the department in WA and also to the team from Integrity Systems Company. So for this afternoon's webinar, we just wanted to take you through a couple of things, and as Deanna said, hopefully provide you with some really practical insight and tips into how you can ensure that you meet your requirements as part of the red meat integrity system and that you're able to be part of an industry that all stands by what they sell. So the things that we'll be touching on this afternoon are the role of the Integrity Systems Company, the importance of the red meat integrity system, the integrity system programs being livestock production assurance and the National Livestock Identification System, some of the changes to the national vendor declarations, introducing you or giving you a refresher around the faster and easier ENVD platform, and then some tips around getting all your integrity accounts in one place using MyMLA. So just to introduce you to Integrity Systems Company, so we're an organisation that's been in place now for a couple of years. We are a fully owned subsidiary of Meat and Livestock Australia, which is a service provider to the industry. And then Integrity Systems Company is, I guess, a program delivery organisation under Meat and Livestock Australia. So Meat and Livestock Australia and ISC both provide industry services. And the organisations there in the top row, known as policy and strategy organisations, they're focused on that advocating on behalf of producers to decision makers in the red meat industry. So all these organisations have separate roles, but all of them work together to support the red meat industry in ensuring that we are part of a sustainable and profitable future. So those organisations there in the top row, quite often referred to as peak industry councils for the whole red meat industry, and certainly the state farming organisations in particular are usually members or have membership of those peak industry councils, and that's the representative model for producers in Australia. So a little bit about Meat and Livestock Australia. So what Meat and Livestock Australia does, or MLA, we provide research, development and adoption activities as well as marketing activities on behalf of red meat producers. We do that through collaborating with the Australian government and the wider red meat industry, and we do that by investing in initiatives that contribute to producer profitability, sustainability and global competitiveness. And the way that we do that is through investing those transaction levies. So whenever sheep, cattle and goats are sold, there is a small levy that then is matched with Australian government dollars up to a certain point, and that money is then invested by MLA in R&D and adoption activities as well as marketing activities. So that's the role of MLA. Integrity Systems Company, so as I said, is a fully owned subsidiary of Meat and Livestock Australia, and we manage and deliver Australia's red meat integrity system. Now, this system underpins consumer confidence in on-farm production of Australian red meat and covers both the on-farm assurance elements through the Livestock Production Assurance Program, or LPA, and then identification and traceability through the National Livestock Identification System, or the NLIS, which I'm sure you're most familiar with. It's been in place now for over 20 years. Now, ISC works collaboratively with government and industry to deliver these world-leading traceability and assurance programs, and these are the foundations of Australia's red meat integrity system. So the red meat integrity system, it ensures that Australia's red meat is safe to eat and fully traceable. It provides both on-farm assurance, animal identification and traceability from paddock to plate, and it underpins the Australian livestock selling system, and it gives confidence to not only buyers but also retailers and consumers, both domestically and all around the world. And it certainly is all connected. So Integrity Systems Company there on the right hand side, we, I guess, deliver and manage those programs on behalf of the industry. The identification and traceability element is delivered through the NLIS, and then the on-farm assurance component is part of the Livestock Production Assurance Program. So just to put all that into context, why is it really important that we have this really rigorous and quite sophisticated integrity system? Well, the Australian red meat industry, you might be surprised to know, is a $28 billion industry. It's certainly punching well above its weight at the moment. We are absolutely enjoying record livestock prices. However, I do understand that there has been some price corrections recently, probably on the back of some demand, particularly overseas, following the COVID situation and the changes in food service demand. However, certainly livestock prices continue to be very high, particularly as seasonal conditions have changed in a large part of the country. So a very big industry worth $28 billion. It employs 400,000 people nationally across 80,000 businesses, and we deliver our product into 100 global markets all around the world. So we are a very large and important industry as part of the Australian economy. There are thousands of people who depend on our industry for their livelihood and their food security and protein requirements. That's both here in Australia, but also all around the world. And the confidence that consumers have in Australian red meat is based on traceability throughout the supply chain, which provides that accountability right back to the farm where the animal was initially raised, and production to an assessed standard. So as a first world country, we often take it for granted that our food is produced both safely and ethically, but this is not the case in every country, and it certainly is something that's very important to a large number of our consumers, particularly when they are paying a premium price for Australian product. So when you are selling food to international markets, and the majority of our red meat does go overseas, It's really important that we have transparent and rigorous production systems that require audited record keeping on farm. And international buyers and international consumers require that these systems are in place. Now, we've got some examples there on the slides where overseas there have been issues raised, such as mad cow disease, such as foot and mouth disease, African swine fever. And it's these sorts of risks to our farms and our consumers that we absolutely want to avoid. And we also want to protect that hard-earned reputation that's been built up over many years that demonstrates that our product is safe and high quality. So that just highlights why the red meat integrity system is so important in Australia, because it protects our industry, our prosperity, our market access and our global advantage, and that's linked to our reputation for providing safe and high quality food. The system also supports premium prices and a positive overseas perception of our product, and it ensures that the Australian reputation as a clean and green supplier of red meat. And while there absolutely are multiple producers and many properties producing livestock around Australia, the integrity system really is about delivering one measure of quality through one integrity system. And it's important that we all have a role to play to ensure that we stand by what we sell. So it doesn't really matter what size farm you are, how many animals you're producing, that everybody has a role to play in making sure that the system and the industry is protected going forward. So I realise that we've got varying level of experience on the webinar today. So just as a quick refresher, we'll provide a little bit more detail on the two key programs which work together to underpin our industry's food safety and traceability on farm. So LPA, or the Livestock Production Assurance Program, is all about on-farm assurance, covering on-farm management of food safety, animal welfare and biosecurity risks. So this is the tick of assurance that your product, or that your food, which comes from your farm and your livestock from producers to consumers, has been met, and it demonstrates the professionalism of our industry and underpins market access for Australian red meat. And the National Livestock Identification System is all about identification and traceability. It tracks the location of every animal throughout its life. It's mandatory for producers and endorsed by major producers, feedlots, agents, sale yards and processor bodies, and it's underpinned by state and territory legislation and enhances Australia's ability to track livestock both during exotic disease and food safety incidents. And the other element where the two programs certainly come together, or the central element to the two programs, is the Property Identification Code, or the PICs. And these are required for registration as part of both LPA and NLIS. PICs are managed independently by the state departments and territory departments of agriculture, and incorporation into LPA and NLIS is the only way that traceability and food safety can be managed at a national level. And for an industry that exports a very high proportion of its product overseas, for example, over 50% of our sheep meat is exported, over 95% of our mutton is exported, the assurance of a strong and effective national system is really important. So this is where having the property identification codes and the regulation at a state level still feeding into a consistent national program is really important, because if you're an exporting partner or an international consumer or customer from overseas, you don't necessarily know about or care about which state the products came from. They just want to know that it's brand Australia. So what does LPA actually mean on farm? So LPA accredited producers commit to carrying out on-farm practices that support the integrity of the entire system. And this is verified when producers sign those LPA national vendor declarations for livestock movements. And the elements of the program which all producers sign up to is property risk assessment, safe and responsible animal treatments, stock foods, fodder crops, grain and pasture treatments, preparation for dispatch of livestock transactions and movements, biosecurity and animal welfare. So for the National Livestock Identification System, what actually does it mean on farm? Well, the NLIS combines 3 different elements to enable the lifetime traceability of animals. So all livestock are identified by a visual or an electronic ear tag or device. All physical locations are identified by means of a property identification code or a PIC, and then all livestock location data and movements are recorded in a central database known as the NLIS database. And then the third element is the Livestock Production Assurance National Vendor Declaration. So what actually does that mean on farm? The LPA NVDs bring together the on-farm assurance, so the LPA and the identification and traceability details from the NLIS. And it's the LPA NVD, or the National Vendor Deck, that I'm sure you're all used to filling out. That's the basis for ensuring the safe and traceable food product. So the LPA NVD captures the food safety information on every animal every time it moves from property to processors or sale yards, and the NVDs provide evidence of livestock history and on-farm practices when transferring livestock through the value chain. And you can only stand by what you sell by ensuring that every NVD you complete is clear, correct and complete, or alternatively use an ENVD for a faster, easier way to manage your consignments. So hopefully you would have heard over the last couple of months that there are a number of changes that have either just recently happened or rolling out between now and the end of the year across the national vendor declarations. So a review of all current NVD versions by SafeMeat in 2019 recommended that a number of changes be made, resulting in the development of updated versions of the LPA National Vendor Decks. Now these changes collectively will provide an easier, more efficient and cost-effective system for producers and supply chain stakeholders to interact with the integrity system. The suite of changes aligns with the industry goal of ensuring that the integrity system of the future is simple to use, valued by industry and trusted by consumers. So the three key changes to the NVDs for 2020 are, there's the changes to the NVD versions for all species following the SafeMeat review. There was a new ENVD system released in the end of March, and then also there is the decommissioning of the eDeck platform for managing your NVDs. So new versions of LPA NVD for all species became available on the 1st of July, and these have been identified by version number 0720. Now the current or the previous versions of the NVDs will continue to be accepted up until the 31st of December this year. So you can use any remaining NVDs that you have in those hard copy books up until the end of this year. However, from the 1st of January 2021, only the updated versions of all NVDs will be accepted for all species. And just an important thing to note there that under MLA's Accelerated Adoption Initiative, there is currently no cost for NVD books until the 1st of July 2021. So in terms of what's actually changed across the suite of 5 different NVDs, so on the sheep NVD, under the description change table, there has been a question now that talks about how many animals in the consignment have been have got an EID tag, for example. So as compared to an NLIS tag with the PIC on the NVD. However, for WA producers, you need to select option B there. So basically the number of EID tags, so for sheep previously there was, unlike cattle, there was the number of just the consignment total number. However, now following the mandatory use of EID in Victoria, that's been changed so that you can have the number of electronic devices in the consignment, and that's increasingly being used in a number of other states as well. However, this also is linked into the use of the NLIS tags with, in WA as well. So that's one key change. On the NVD, that's the second one there around the inclusion of the EID devices for this for a sheep consignment. And as I said, that's about increasing use in other states as well. The other main change in the NVDs is also around the inclusion of a destination PIC. Now this is actually mandatory in WA and Tasmania and optional in other states. However, for those other states, we certainly are encouraging people that are still using the hard copy NVD that they do include the destination PIC. Certainly helps when it comes to doing your NLIS transfers on the database, and also helps with maintaining that lifetime traceability. Now, throughout today's presentation, we've got a couple of integrity insights or just practical tips for you, but how to find a destination PIC in WA. There's a couple of ways you can go about that, and that's asking the agent, the buyer or the destination property owner manager before you're loading at the yard, so you've got your NVD as complete as you possibly can. You can search the WA brands register, or you can call the 1300 WA NLIS number on the screen there, or request a common PIC card, and that lists commonly used PICs for sheep and cattle producers. And if you are using the ENVD, you can search. You can use the search function, which is really quite sophisticated and very easy to use now. The other key change on the NVDs now is removal of the agent's declaration. So that was part C that was previously on previous versions. Now, to order copies of the new NVD, you can certainly do that through the Livestock Production Assurance Service Centre, or you can log on to the Integrity Systems Company website listed there, or you can call the ISC help desk. So as I said earlier, the EDEC is also being decommissioned over the course of 2020. So from the 30th of April this year, you are no longer able to purchase any tokens for ENVDs. Between the 30th of April and the 31st of December, any tokens that were previously purchased can continue to be used. And as of the 31st of December this year, access to the EDEC system officially ends. Now, the new ENVD, which we'll touch on shortly, covers all the information and all the capability that the EDEC does, but in a much better, much more user-friendly, much more intuitive way, and we'll touch on that shortly. And certainly running a single digital system will present a significant cost and time saving to industry going forward. So sorry, Deanna.
Kathleen, I was just going to remind people to just head down to the Q&A function down the bottom. If you do have questions, just pop them in there, even as they come up, as you think of them, and we'll collate them as we go through, and we'll present or put them out to our speakers at the end. So pop them in there. Over to you, Kathleen.
Thanks, Deanna, and I just quickly snuck a drink of water as well. So that's the changes which have been rolled out over the last couple of months, focusing on the NVD and a little bit of information about how the integrity system works. But basically from here on, ISC is working with industry influencers and producers right across Australia to build awareness, knowledge and skills in LPA and NLIS. And we really want to help with and work industry to ensure that the whole industry can stand by what it sells. And so part of our strategy is to communicate practical tips on how producers can meet their requirements of Australia's red meat integrity system. Because I think we do all certainly agree that the system is complex. I don't think it's complicated. We're trying to make it as simple and as easy to comply, but it is quite complex. But keeping that all within the context and within the background of the fact that it is a large industry and we enjoy access for our products and high livestock prices on the back of some fairly significant export demand for Australian red meat. So what I thought we'd do now is just to go through and to give you a series of tips to make so that you can see how the systems all work together and the programs within the system, work together, but also some tips on how you can meet your integrity requirements. So by being part of livestock production assurance means that producers need to keep your online LPA account details up to date. You need to maintain your LPA accreditation, and this includes doing the online learning and the assessment to understand LPA's requirements for livestock and property management and renewing your accreditation every 3 years. Now, livestock production assurance accreditation gives you more options for marketing your livestock and means that you can access LPA NVDs for all livestock movement between PICs. As producers, you need to ensure that you manage your livestock and property in line with the 7 LPA on-farm standards that we've talked about previously. You need to maintain thorough records as evidence of the livestock history and your on-farm practices, and need to be prepared to undergo an audit if requested. So LPA is an audited accreditation, so as a livestock producer you agree to complete an audit when asked, and this provides accountability from paddock to plate. And you can see in that diagram on the right hand side, so that's the elements of what you need to do in terms of the on-farm assurance or the LPA component, but you'll also be able to see what you need to do as part of NLIS, and then you'll see where the two programs come together at either the property identification code and then at the LPA NVD, and then also through keeping those records in order as well. So for the National Livestock Identification System, as producers, you need to make sure that you keep your online NLIS account details up to date. You need to order and use NLIS tags as identifiers for every animal on your pick. The required tag types differ a bit between the states and territories, but every animal must be tagged with an accredited NLIS device and can't be moved to another pick without one, including to another farm, feedlot, sale yard or a processor. You need to make sure that you're recording movements of livestock in the NLIS database. So livestock transfers between picks must be recorded by transferring the tags in the NLIS database. Now, the person receiving the livestock is responsible for completing the transfer, and property-to-property transfers in WA must be completed within 48 hours of the movement occurring. All producers need to regularly check their own records against the database to ensure that transfers have been completed. This is particularly important if you're relying on someone else to do the transfer, so you need to check that that's actually happened. It's also recommended that you do a pick reconciliation every year to ensure that the NLIS database is an accurate record of the NLIS devices and livestock on your property. To ensure lifetime livestock traceability, the NLIS database sometimes issues automated emails when differences or discrepancies occur. So you may have seen from time to time, if you've had an animal go through a sale yard, then you'll receive an NLIS warning which says that that animal wasn't actually registered to your pick. It's important that you investigate those differences if you're notified and then update the database accordingly. So producers need to remember that completing a livestock transfers on the database is an auditable requirement of the LPA, and that auditors will review NVDs, ENVDs and NLIS transfers. Now, Dee, I can see that there's a couple of questions coming in. I think we could probably hold them over because I do touch on those things going forward. So is that, are you okay with that? Yep, okay. Yep. All right, so we've done LPA, we've done NLIS. The next thing for producers to really be across is the NVD. So it's really important that you maintain your LPA accreditation to firstly be able to access those LPA NVDs. Now, NVDs are a legal document. They're your declaration that you've met the requirements of the LPA program. The declaration is then married to the livestock's lifetime traceability when the transfer is completed on the database. Assurance and traceability need to go hand in hand so that our customers can remain confident in our integrity system. So when you tick boxes on the LPA NVD, you're declaring that your on-farm practices meet those LPA requirements and our customers' expectations. A tick on an NVD must be backed up by accurate farm records, and this is your pledge, your declaration that the meat from your farm has been produced safely, ethically and meets biosecurity requirements, and it means that you stand by what you sell. And I think it's important to note there that even if you are actually only selling livestock, and I use the word only quite carefully. I mean, if you're selling animals from property to property, or if you're a seed stock producer and you're selling rams, for example, that type of thing, you're still very much part of the red meat or the food chain. So regardless of whether the initial sale might be for breeding purposes and things like that, we've just got to always have in the back of our mind that we are part of the food chain and the food system, and that that's why it's really important that we consider that the meat that's coming from the farm or the livestock that we produce at some point has been produced safely, ethically and meets all those requirements. It's also really important that you file your completed NVDs in case of an audit, because NLIS transfers are also part of the LPA audits, or you can use the ENVD and then you don't have to worry about filing because it's all done for you. Because consumer confidence in the system relies on that assurance and traceability being linked. So the biggest tip in terms of standing by what you sell is to make sure that every LPA NVD is filled out so that it is clear, correct and complete. This is the documentation, this is the declaration. So there's a whole page of tips in terms of how to fill out the LPA NVD correctly in the new LPA NVD booklet on how to fill it out. We're just going to focus on some of the key areas today where there's confusion, but you'll certainly start to see this diagram not only on the inside cover of the NVD, but also in some other communication materials. And as we roll out some significant communication and extension activities over the next couple of months, you'll start seeing this in signs, in sale yards, for example, rural retail outlets and the like. But we'll just focus on some of these questions where we have a little bit of trouble. So the first part of the NVD is the questions, where sometimes we need a little bit of a hand. So these questions in part A are all about the animal's history. So this information is crucial for food safety and market access. So it's always key here to stay on the safe side. So if in doubt, tick yes. So I'm going to touch on a couple of examples here. So, and for question 1, for example, an increasing number of markets will not accept beef or beef products that have been treated with hormonal growth promotants. So answering this question correctly is vital to protecting Australia's access to those markets. And some of these markets really are very, very sensitive. And it doesn't take much for a trade collapse in some markets. So on the cattle NVD, you must declare if cattle have ever been treated with HGPs in their lifetime. And if you don't know the answer, or if you have any doubt, then tick yes. And always remember that no cattle for an EU market can be treated with HGPs. And a little insight there, and something you can get from the LPA Learning Suite, is don't forget that cattle treated with HGPs must be identified by a triangular ear punch. So if you're using HGPs, or certainly if you've bought cattle that have been previously treated with HGPs, you can tell very quickly if they've got that triangular ear punch. So question 2, we'll switch now to the sheep NVD. So this is about checking your records for the question in particular about scabby mouth. So have all these sheep in this consignment been treated with a scabby mouth vaccination, either at marking? So again, checking your records, keeping good, accurate records to make sure that when it comes to completing your NVD, you've got those records in an easy to grab place and you can refer to them. And this is where the LPA starts to come together with the NVD, all part of that record keeping. So question 3, has the owner stated above owned these cattle since their birth? Same question on the sheep one. So if you bred the livestock, tick yes. If you purchased one or more animals within the consignment, tick no, then indicate the most recent date of purchase. So important to note here, you can't tick both yes and no. So even if you've got animals within a mixed consignment, for example, where you may have bred some and not the others, don't tick both questions, because in terms of the receiver or the buyer or the sale yard that's processing those, they can't be dealing with 2 questions, and that applies, 2 answers to the same question. So that applies throughout the NVD. The other thing is please don't tick all 4 answers in terms of how long you've owned the animals. Tick the one that is the most recent for the whole consignment. Similarly with chemical and veterinary treatments, withholding periods and feed, it's always best to declare the risk. For all questions, tick yes or no, not both. And again, check your records to be sure. Same that all animals in the consignment have not been fed restricted animal material, and these include meat and offal, animal fats, blood, meat, bone or blood meal. With veterinary or chemical treatments, you need to check whether livestock are within withholding periods or export slaughter intervals. You can do that by contacting your reseller where you purchase the product from, check the label. For export slaughter intervals in particular, which aren't necessarily the same as a withholding period, you can go onto the APVMA website and you can search for all those details on that website there, and we'll make sure that we share that with you. But basically, again, same sorts of things. If you're unsure, then you should tick yes, provide as much detail as you can as possible so that you are providing a clear, complete and correct NVD. And always check your records to see if livestock in the consignment have consumed any material that was still within a holding period. So there's both the treatment of the animal with a chemical, but also if it's been fed a fodder or had access or grazed a material that's still within a withholding period as well.
So Kathleen, just before we move on there, we've had a question about question 3. How does that relate to a third-party feeder who does not own the animals?
Okay, let me just go back. So in terms of, Beth, do you have a quick answer to that question while I try and go back to question 3? Is this something that you're seeing quite regularly? My question 3 is, has the owner owned the animals since their birth? So sorry, Dee, say the question again for me.
Yeah, so the question was, how does that relate to a third-party feeder who does not own the animals?
Well, in terms of completing the NVD, the person that's responsible for the husbandry of the animal at the time needs to complete the NVD. So if the animals are located on a pick, that NVD needs to come from that pick. and they would have to be aware of the history so that they can complete that NVD. That would be my understanding. Is that the interpretation at a WA level, Beth?
Yeah, it is,
yeah.
Kathleen. We're talking about the property the animals are leaving.
Yes. Yep.
Have they been there their whole life or not?
Excellent. Okay, thank you. And just while we're tracking through these ones, we've had a question. What do you do if sheep eat treated grain? There is no withholding period published. Do we have any insight as to that one while we're in this section?
It depends what it's treated with, because whatever you treat it with should have a label, and that would have the withholding period on the label if there was an issue with it. So it depends on what you're treating it with.
Okay.
Absolutely, and the only other thing that I would add there is if it was grain that had been purchased in, you really should be asking the supplier of the grain for a commodity vendor declaration, and they should be absolutely providing that information as part of that sale. So, and the commodity vendor deck is all about that, managing that food safety risk. So commodity vendor decks are available on the Integrity Systems Company website, so but they don't apply to commercially made feeds such as pellets and things like that, but certainly encourage you to get a commodity vendor deck for any hay that's being purchased in, grain and things like that, so you understand that full history, because absolutely you need to ask where you purchased that that grain from in terms of the history and the treatment.
Excellent, thank you. And we've had a question along similar lines from Gerald. How do I know the fodder that I buy in has met all these standards? So he can access a commodity vendor declaration as well.
Absolutely, and I think that, I mean, a supplier should be able to provide you with that information. But however, I do certainly understand that in fairly stressful times, and we had to deal with this on a number of cases recently following bushfires and droughts and things like that, where people are receiving donated fodder in particular, and yes, it does become tricky. And also, if you are in a bushfire scenario, accept absolutely that asking somebody for a commodity vendor deck is neither a priority or realistic in some of those situations, but it's all about managing the risk. It's about managing the biosecurity risk of any fodder and grain that you might be buying in on farm, that you can then manage potential weed incursions and things like that going forward. However, you also have the commodity vendor deck option, where you can ask your supplier for the history of the food at an appropriate time, but the commodity vendor deck won't give you weed and history, like that type of level of declaration or assurance. It's more about the food safety, so any chemical treatments. But I would encourage anybody, if you're purchasing in fodder, to try and get as much of that history as you possibly can through the commodity vendor deck.
Awesome, thanks Kathleen.
So the final part of Part A, I guess, is the declaration, and this is your declaration and guarantee that you've met all the LPA requirements and that the NVD is complete and correct, and that the animals have not had access to restricted animal material, which is of crucial importance for a number of our markets. And don't forget that the LPA NVDs are a legal document and a part of your LPA record keeping, and so therefore can be audited. And that brings us to Part B of the NVD, which is the part that we need to have completed by the livestock carrier. So don't let the truckie leave without filling out this section, because otherwise you won't have his signature or her signature on your copy of the NVD going forward. And just a final note there about mixed consignments for the NVD. Now, if you can identify and separate the animals, either when they get off the truck at the sale yard or whether you're loading them onto the truck, for example, then yes, you can and probably should do more than one NVD. So just to be clear, if you've got a mixed consignment and you can identify and separate those animals, then absolutely yes, do a separate NVD. If you can't, then you need to do a single NVD, but you need to make sure that the risk is across the whole mixed consignment. And that is particularly relevant to the section around how long you've owned those animals for. Okay, so we'll move on now and have a little look at the new ENVD system. So the new mobile-friendly, user-centric ENVD system has been developed on feedback that the ISC has sought since the ENVD's initial launch in 2017, and it was originally established as an alternative to using the paper NVD books. Now, the faster, easier ENVD system is available to LPA accredited producers, feedlots and value chain stakeholders. It is more accurate than paper forms, and it ensures that the latest versions of the NVD are being used and therefore meet market requirements. It reduces time and duplication spent completing livestock assurance and health declarations. It reduces the cost of storing and retrieving historical consignments for auditing, reporting and administrative purposes. And again, that's something that certainly came up in quite difficult circumstances following bushfires, both recently across the country. And one of the other strong benefits of the ENVD is that you don't need to wait for the new NVD books to arrive, as well as stakeholders along the supply chain can log in and can view consignments, including receivers of stock using the ENVD platform. So the ENVD is not just another NVD, it's a system for completing all your consignment paperwork digitally, including your livestock assurance and health declaration. So once you log on to the ENVD system, you're simply prompted to ask which declarations you would like to complete, and then you're only entering those details once, and it automatically populates all those other forms, such as an animal health statement, your MSA declaration, EU declaration and the like. You can access the new ENVD system by logging in to the LPA Service Centre or using your LPA credentials, so your user ID and password, or you can access it going through the Integrity Systems Company website. So why is the new ENVD version better? Well, as I said, we've just recently released a new ENVD, and that was on the back of some fairly extensive consultation by Integrity Systems Company with stakeholders along the supply chain. It underwent some rigorous testing, including by producers and the feedlot sector. You can print it at any time, even when it's incomplete. There's unlimited space for livestock descriptions. You can draw the signature or brand using a touchscreen device or your mouse, unlike previously where you had to upload a scanned copy of a signature, for example. And there's a number of new features and enhancements which are being routinely released in response to feedback that we're receiving now as the new ENVD is being released. And so, as you can see, the system update information that we have at the moment, it's available on the ISC website. If you just want to search for ENVD system updates, you'll find it. We also have that regularly available in Integrity Matters. A bit of a summary in terms of what's actually happened since it was launched. We've had the mixed sex option for sheep, lamb and goat consignments. The save button from the transporter step, or the final step in the consignment, has been removed. The look and feel of the movement information page, and there's also been a number of performance issues, including screen errors, that has been resolved. As you'd expect, we've got a number of releases and improvements coming up, and they're planned over a rolling staged release of updates coming over the next sort of 12 months, including a cow and calf sex option in the consignment details, the ability to delete submitted consignments, and a series of bug fixes. And there's just another integrity insight for you. ISC continuously updates the ENVD to ensure that it meets expectations and requirements. Updates are listed on the website, and we absolutely welcome your feedback at any time, and you can send that through to the envd@integritysystems.com.au email address. So for the remainder of the session, I thought we'd focus very quickly on a couple of integrity insights. So this is the practical tips to help you get through the integrity requirements. So a couple here for tips for filling out the NVDs on the go. So fill out as much of the NVD as you can before going to the yard. So that way you don't have the dog with the muddy paw stepping all over your NVD book. You're organised, you've got as much of it filled out before you head down to the yards to load. Don't get caught short. Order your new NVD book early or start using the ENVD platform. Always keep your LPA records up to date so that the information you need to enter is ready to go. So you're not then racking back through paperwork or your little paddock book to try and find out what information. Make sure that you've got all your LPA records up to date and in one place. File the NVD to keep a copy as part of your records, and then also check the NLIS database to ensure that transfers have actually occurred. From an NLIS point of view, make sure that you're checking the NLIS database, checking your transfers and doing your PIC reconciliations. And if you need help navigating the NLIS database, there's a series of tech tips already there. But if you stay tuned, we're actually in the process of developing a number of how-to, fairly intuitive and available online help guides at the moment. Check the NLIS database whenever transfers have been completed to ensure that the numbers are correct, because it can save you a lot of time rather than correcting mistakes later on. From an LPA point of view, I've talked quite a lot today about making sure that your record keeping is up to date, and you should try and align that record keeping to the 7 LPA standards. And it's really quite easy to be able to do that. We've got a whole heap of templates and checklists and guides to help you do that. So you can download these free templates from the ISC website. If you just search for LPA record keeping templates, or there's a whole record keeping section, and you'll see that for each of those different LPA standards, for example, property risk assessment, safe and responsible treatment of animals, the biosecurity templates, there's a whole heap of useful guides that you can find there that'll make your record keeping a lot easier, and you can order a copy of that if you would prefer to have a hard copy. Some other LPA record keeping practical tips to help you make sure that you've got that information in one place. I mean, basically there's no perfect formula for record keeping, but we've got a couple of ideas. I mean, it depends on the size of your farm, your technology, your appetite for technology, what your connectivity is like, but there certainly isn't an expectation that you are using really sophisticated decision support tools, but there are plenty of them out there. You can be using an old-fashioned spreadsheet, or you can still be using hard copy. But a couple of tips: ask your supplier to add the ag chem or the vet product batch number and expiry date to the invoice, so you've got that as part of your livestock records. I absolutely can't get enough of using my phone when it comes to keeping your LPA records. So we're all journalists these days. We've all got smartphones, so take photos. All those photos are always date stamped, and you've got a record, and particularly if you're saving them into the cloud. So a good one that I do here, we have sheep on farm, so whenever I'm drenching or treating sheep, I'll put the drench drum in the front of the photo, turn it around so you can see the batch number and expiry date on it, mob of sheep in the background, make sure a few of them are looking at you. Sometimes you've got to get the dog to help, but so you can see the colour of the ear tag so you know which mob you're dealing with. Take your photo, it's date stamped, your record keeping is done. Easy. Simply add that up to a note file, or email it to yourself, and you've got a full record that not only meets your LPA requirements but also is meeting your chemical use records as well. And as we touched on earlier, when purchasing fodder, hay or grain, download a copy of the commodity vendor deck and ask the supplier to fill it in. If you can't get a commodity vendor deck from the supplier, you can simply wait 60 days. So essentially giving yourself a withholding period of 60 days before you move those animals. So that's another risk management approach with buying in feed. And then I know we've got a couple of questions about audits, and we could do a whole webinar on audits, and if that's something of interest, then please do let us know. But as I said earlier, the LPA program is an audited accreditation, but from the outset, don't panic. Audits are about identifying areas for improvement. It's not necessarily about a naming and shaming. It's about giving you some practical advice for how you can improve things on farm to still make sure that you're able to participate in the industry and stand by what you sell. Your LPA records will be reviewed, including those NVDs and your NLIS transfers, so it's important that you make sure that everything's accurate and up to date, and that they will give you tips in order to help you in the future. And for example, things like, did you know that you need a copy of the Australian Animal Welfare Standards and Guidelines on hand for your LPA audit? So download it, you don't need to print it. It's a pretty wordy sort of a document, but if you bookmark it on your browser and have it and know that all your team can have access to it. That's just a handy tip from an audit point of view. So just to finish off very quickly, Integrity Systems Company has a whole range of information, and we've made this available to the departments as well, and also certainly the department over there in WA has a lot of information as well. Integrity Systems Company website is a one-stop shop now for all things integrity systems. We have our Integrity Matters email, which goes out monthly, which you should all receive. If you don't, reach out and we can add you to the list, or you can subscribe through our website. We're pretty active now on social media through Facebook, Twitter, and also YouTube. However, post-COVID, you will see us out and about face-to-face, so we have a number of hard copy publications as well. And I did also mention that we'll be doing some things in with livestock agents and sale yards and rural retailers as well, so you'll start seeing some signage and practical help available, not just online. Got a whole heap of tools and resources, from videos, how-to animations. There's some LPA learning guides online. There's FAQs, fact sheets, the templates that I touched on for the record keeping. You can email the help desk, and you can always phone the help desk if you're really stuck, and they can show you how to not only meet your requirements but deal with a specific inquiry. And just before we finish, because I can see there's about 1 million questions coming in, just one thing that I would encourage everybody is to sign up to MyMLA. So MyMLA is a customised dashboard of market information tailored to you and your area and your production system. However, the real game changer is the single sign-on facility. So what you can do is you can actually link all your integrity and your industry accounts, including MSA and livestock data link, and you then only have to access those accounts using one username and password. So I don't know about anybody else, but I certainly over the years have found it quite frustrating that you have so many different user IDs and passwords to access the different integrity accounts, let alone your bank accounts and everything like that. But you can link all your accounts in MyMLA, and that just screenshot there. If you go on and subscribe to MyMLA, set up your account, and then go to that linked account function, and you can enter your details, and then you'll only need one sign-on going forward. Now, we'll share some resources in the email along with a copy of today's recording tomorrow that will help you with MyMLA. But honestly, it is a real, it's a lifesaver. So I'd absolutely encourage you to sign up to MyMLA. But it also provides you with a customised weather forecast, prices and markets information relevant to your location and your production system, any nearby events, as well as news and information and links to relevant resource materials produced by MLA. So that's it from me. Thank you very much. Happy to take some questions. I will defer to the team of experts that I've got on the call. But yeah, that's it from me. So thanks, Dee.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathleen. A virtual round of applause. There's a lot of info packed in a short space of time there. And we do have a stash of really good questions. So I'm going to start with, what if you've purchased, say, 900 sheep from a sale yard that comprised 8 different picks? How can you track each sheep when they're all mixed up on farm? And someone who might be able to give us a comment on that one.
Goodness me. That's a lot of sheep, and that's from a lot of different picks, but understanding, I mean, absolutely that would happen, but I mean, you certainly would still need to understand the history of where they all came from. So they would, if they came from 8 different picks through a sale yard, for example, they would all be accompanied by 8 different NVDs, is my take on the question. So that would be the easiest way to track that information, and then they would all have their own individual tags. So when it comes to your actual property, if you did want to do something with them in their original lots, then I mean, at a very practical level, it would involve drafting them off. But if you purchase that many sheep in one lot from a sale yard, they would all still be expected to come with their 8 different NVDs. Is that your confirmation there of that, Beth, as well?
I think what they've got to remember is when you purchase multiple lines or any lines from a sale yard, you get your post-sale summary, and each vendor that you've purchased off, the answers to their NVD questions 1 to 9 will be on that post-sale summary. So it will say no, no, yes, no, 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 no. That's sort of the homebred answers. So they must keep that record so they know what the sheep they have just purchased have been treated with, if anything. And if there's a range of answers, when they then move those sheep on, they're going to have to answer the question that gives us the most risk management option. So if it says scabby mouth and some have and some haven't, well, then you have to answer for the ones that no, they haven't all been treated with scabby mouth. So, and like you said, the other answers, when you don't know the answers, you have to answer yes, except for question 3, which is homebred, don't answer yes if you're not sure to that question. So they really need to take into account their post-sale summaries and have a look at those answers that are on there, that people may not realise that's what those letters mean on their paperwork.
Yeah, and then if that mixed consignment is then going off that property from whoever's purchased them, well then it can go off as one NVD. But again, you need to certainly answer each question in isolation and use that risk management approach based on in terms of ownership and things like that right through.
Awesome, thanks guys. Now we have a bit of a stash of ENVD questions, so we might just
we have the guru.
Emily. She's here, ready to
Welcome,
answer them.
Emily.
So we've had a bit of a question around SMS availability. So can we have the ENVD sent to the truck driver by SMS?
So at the moment, SMS capability is not enabled for ENVD, but it's certainly something that we can do. Obviously, SMS is limited by phone connectivity or device connectivity, rather. But this is going to be one of those watch this space enhancements. So we are just about to embark on a section of work that explores the offline capability of ENVD. And so that will include all of these processes and transactions whereby people along the supply chain are in and out of service. And so there will be various methods of communicating the NVD along to those participants in the next 6 to 12 months.
Excellent, thanks Emily. Next question, is there any way of placing the agent's name on the ENVD before printing?
Absolutely. So we have done a lot of work, I think it was mentioned in Kathleen's presentation, to the movement information screen. So this is when you start an ENVD, this is one of the first screens that appears, and it'll ask you where livestock are going, both destination and consignee. And unlike the paper forms, we've got a bit of flexibility here around entering the destination. As you'll see, your destination in Western Australia is mandatory now on the new versions of NVD. So we are facilitating that in ENVD. If you're coming from a Western Australian pick, we'll ensure that you're entering a destination, but you can also then put your agent as a consignee. So you can list who you're consigning those livestock to. And there is examples there in the help content that's on the page. So if you're wondering where that is, just have a bit of a click around on the little information bubbles and they'll show you where to put your agent's information.
Great, thank you. Another one here, in regards to the ENVD, can you use it without an internet connection? Are you getting the truck driver to sign it rather than having to go to the house?
Okay, so at this present moment, as I just explained, the simple answer is no. If your truck driver isn't willing to sign on a mobile device, then you're best to print a hard copy. And just a reminder that ENVD's been built with a lot of flexibility in mind, because we know there are these situations where it's likely that you're in an offline situation, so you can print that ENVD at any time.
Awesome. Another one, can you make PICs predictive or can you add the ability to add an e-signature to the ENVD?
So we're constantly working on improving our pick search. We do have some predictive elements in there around knowing which pick you're coming from, knowing your recent locations are always shown in the drop down underneath your pick search. And we will get better at predicting the picks that you're looking for. So you will see continuous improvement in this area, but at the moment we don't have predictive text with the likes of Google do. And the second part of the question, Deanna, what was that?
About adding an e-signature.
Of course. So the signatures is an area where we've received quite a bit of feedback. We are looking to improve the way that you can enter a signature. At the moment it's drawing and it will stay that way, but we will also add additional methods of entering a digital signature. Just remembering that we do actually have to populate a full signature on the document. So it will always eventuate that you need to have your signature in some form in the ENVD system, but we will start introducing other ways to do this. So for example, uploading your digital signature will become an option in the near future.
Great, thank you. Now I think that we've answered most of the questions either verbally or a written answer in the Q&A. I will just cross to Beth to make a quick comment just regarding the destination and agents question from before. If you want to have a quick word back, Beth.
Yeah, thanks, Deanna. I just wanted to make it clear that when you enter consigned to, that's your agent details. The destination road address has always been a requirement. The destination pick has been a legal requirement now for 7 years, but what I would like West Australian producers to know is that there is now the box to put the destination pick in. So it's always been a requirement to put a destination in, but the destination doesn't have to be the same as consigned to, because you can consign to your agent at the destination being the Katanning sale yards or the Mouchet sale yards, which is different and has its own pick. So you want to put the destination pick of the destination address, not the pick of who it's consigned to, because it may not be correct.
Great, thank you, Beth. I'm now conscious that we're a few minutes over, and I think we've answered most of the questions. If you do have a burning question, please put it in the chat just now. But what I will do is, I guess, just thank everyone for joining us on the webinar. Don't forget the evaluation survey. So we're just going to pop a link to that in the chat function now. We really want to know if this format suits you, particularly for updates on the red meat integrity system and integrity systems company work overall. If you've got any suggestions on topics that you'd like to see in the near future, then please do let us know about those as well. As Kathleen mentioned, we will package up some resources and we will email these to you in the next 24 hours. So we're going to have some links in there to the ENVD videos and NVD video, how you fill these things out. I see there's a question there about loading movement details to the NLIS database. So we'll have a few little links in there to give you some tips and hints on how to do that. So I might just say, Kathleen, do you have a final comment before we finish up? Oh, Kathleen, I think you're on mute.
I'm muted again.
Yep.
Thanks very much, Dee. So just reiterating what Deanna said. So thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. Thanks to Beth for the technical WA help, and thanks to the ISC team, particularly Em in terms of those ENVD questions and queries. But thanks again everyone for joining us. Absolutely, if you could please fill in the feedback, that would be really helpful, or alternatively you can just reach out at any time. We'll provide contact details in the email that we send out tomorrow with the recording, and we're absolutely here to help in terms of any queries that you might have with meeting your integrity requirements. But thanks everyone for joining us, and all the best.